So basically, we are from UWE States. We are representing the client, UWE, and we're going to talk about what happened at completion. So all the building information, how we're using the building, and we have some feedback onto how the building is performing.
Right, okay, thank you. Although we say post-completion handover, it's really trying to build a picture of how we got to the stage before actually getting to handover. As Andrew said, it was a design and build project. I can't recall anywhere within our employers' requirements where we mentioned the word BIM, either within the consultants' employers' requirements or the contractors. So that shows how far we've come in 5 years, because our latest is quite heavy on that area. We went to Revit stage E+, and then novated over the design team. The university now, since then, has developed quite a comprehensive design guide, but at the time we didn't have that, so we were led quite heavily by our consultant team and actually what was required to go into this particular building. Andrew will mention about RAP. I think he's actually not telling the whole story really. But we actually sprung on the RAP requirements quite late in the design process, and I can remember the look on their faces as they looked at each other thinking, how on earth are we going to put this requirement at this stage into the design? And it did present a lot of difficulties, both at the design stage and later on. We mentioned the cladding. The cladding was a brand new system that had not been tried anywhere else, so it was a risk to us. When it came to site, when it was being built, I was surprised personally at how many came to site when they opened the box broken, so it must have caused the contractor issues as well. But they say they did come with a 20% recycled element, and we're now in the process of updating the requirements that goes in our design guides because they're now too low. In terms of soft landings, again, there was nothing in the employer's requirements regarding soft landings. I think we were vaguely aware of soft landings at the time, but not visibly because it hadn't been formalised at that point. The contractor, probably, which was Wilmot Dixon's, probably about a quarter of the way through, suggested we actually employ soft landings. We then had a series of workshops which looked very, very promising. There were a number of initiatives they had which was, say, very common sense really, things like forming rooms, and then that would become the standard by which they would work towards. The reality was, when the programme was so fast though, that the contractor then came concentrated on actually delivering the end date. So all the good things that we would hoped and were promised never really materialised. So I think for us as a client, it's telling us that if we want these things, we need to make sure they're written into the contract documents on day one, and that's where we are as a university now, that it's actually within the documents and saying it's a contractual requirement as opposed to waiting for someone to do it as a bolt-on, as an extra for us. And there was various issues why the contractor found it difficult and why we got to a situation where it was a rush at the end. Some things that we thought we were trying to help, such as we put in an enabling contract for the groundworks and the foundations, which enabled the contractor to get to site early, which we thought would obviously reduce the programme time they required. The result really was that I think they were surprised at then how little time they had to mobilise. So instead of having sort of 6 weeks, 2 months to mobilise and get themselves into a position to begin taking the design forward, they arrived on site and then had to hit the ground running. And I don't think they ever really recovered from that level of intensity that they needed to engage in from day one. The other issue I think we had was that there was a protracted negotiation of the M&E supply chain by the contractor. So they didn't engage the M&E contractor until quite late. and I think there was I think that affected the delivery later on of the project. And again, we've learned from that in that as a university, we now state that when we go out to major contracts, that we actually ask the contractor to commit to their M&E contractor at tender stage, so that there's no post-award negotiation with various parties. Our handover, I think there's a sheet here. I think it's safe to say the contractor and the consultants were asking us quite early on what we required. We have sort of documentations about what we require generally, but there were gaps in the requirements. They asked us quite early about what our O&M structure should be, and we weren't able to tell them then, and to be honest, even at the end of the project, we weren't in a position, due to various processes, that we could actually resolve. So these are things that we've recognised as a client that we've needed to raise our game to aid the process. Building documentation. Unfortunately, that picture there is a picture of our cupboard where we keep our O&M manuals. Not particularly very proud of that, and I've subsequently got one of our girls to come and relabel the whole thing and reorganise it. But it really just demonstrates the difficulty of maintaining paper-based O&M manuals. An issue we have is we don't have an O&M manuals for a building wide. We have it as a project by project. What we're hoping is that with BIM we can get more towards a building O&M, and then the contract O&Ms then update the main building O&Ms. So reality is we've got electronic version of all of our O&Ms, which are probably more reliable than our paper copies. But it is, at a state of this size, it is very hard to maintain and control your O&M manuals.
Andrew explained that this building was designed through a Revit model, and on completion date we received that model within states. That model has been sitting since 2010 on the S drive, and not until now that we're starting to see the benefit of having these models for the state's portfolio. I'm showing here, this is an image of the current model that we hold, but all the operations and maintenance is done through CAD, so all the CAD information is being exported from the model, and what we currently use is CAD drawings. Other uses that we have given to the model is to create 3D images to help either on education or to sustainability group, to create posters for students to know about the sustainable features that the building has. But in the future, we are planning to run a new FM system that is capable to link to BIM models. And the idea is that this FM system can bidirectionally be a link to the model and have the data sitting within the model and be both managed from the FM side or from the model. So that's something that we are, at the moment, we're exploring, and we're trying to get to a position where when we receive a new model for a new building, we are able on day one to receive the key, all the documentation and the model to be connected on day one to the FM system. Now energy performance.
Okay. Hi everyone, thank you Simon. For those that don't know me, my name's Fabia and I'm the energy manager here at UWE. So what I've got here are a couple of slides of how the building's actually performing in terms of energy. So as Andrew said, we got the BREEAM excellent rating. So we've got that certificate there on display as well for the students and staff to know what rating we got. And there's the breakdown as well of the different areas that we awarded it in. But for me, the bit that's most interesting in terms of energy is how did our EPC, so the Energy Performance Certificate, which gave it a B rating, how does it perform in practice, and what's our DEC rating, so our Display Energy Certificate. So if that's new to anyone, but typically I might expect that my deck rating is going to go up. So I'm going to get a worse performing building in reality than what we predict. But for the last 3 years, so for every year since it's been built, we've got a deck rating of B and 35. So that's actually achieving what the EPC rating is. So I don't know how you've done it, but it's actually gone against the grain in some ways. So then the interesting and challenging bit from the energy manager's point of view is to work out, not only go, yep, it's working fine, I'm going to forget about you, but actually how else can we improve it, and how can we still fine-tune it? Because even though this building is working well in terms of energy, there's still some issues that we really need to unpick and resolve, because it could be working so much better. Just to put it into context, just to put it into context, this is a portfolio of all of our buildings at the Frenchay site, Bower Ashton and Glenside. Our block, phase 2, is over here. So it really is one of our best performing buildings. The ones I've highlighted in blue as well, this is just to put the deck ratings in perspective. The ones that have got the squares around them, those are our largest buildings. So actually, well, you can see from the energy manager point of view, we've got some of our worst performing are some of our largest buildings. There's a lot of issues there to deal with, but our block, again, it's right down there at the end. So you might think, I'm not really going to spend that much time trying to resolve some of these issues. So what this graph is looking at the electricity, gas, and biofuel data that we've got on this building, so we can start to work out, again, sort of how well is it performing in those areas. I'll just quickly tell you what I've put here on the screen. I've put it all in terms of carbon emissions, annual carbon emissions, because then we can compare the PV to biofuel, gas and electricity. I've also degree day adjusted the heating related parts of the data. So again, we can't say, oh, well, that was a really cold year or that was a warm year. What else have I done to the data? I think that's really all I've done to adjust it. So what we can see is that our gas, which is the grey bit, if we're having issues with our biofuel boiler, then our gas consumption is going up. You can barely see it, but there's a little slither there of our biofuel boiler. When that starts working, our gas demand is obviously going down. So that's a really good one for us. Biofuel boiler, when it's working and it's all super, means that we're not using the gas. The one which is slightly worrying in my mind is the electricity. You can see year on year from when it was built to just last year, we're increasing our electricity use. This chunk here is the amount of electricity that we get from our solar PV. So the total electricity that we consume in our block is the green plus the orange. This is one level of understanding the energy use: electricity, gas, biofuel, and the solar PV. We can see how the energy that's going into the building. But if I'm trying to understand how is it actually used in the building in terms of lighting, cooling, PCs, that's when we need a better level of sub-metering. We've got the sub-meters actually in the building, but what we haven't got is them connected onto our AMR system, so they're not being logged. So that's a lesson that we've now learned, that we need to start designing that element of the project actually into the actual project. So the moment that it is being designed and built, that we connect it into the AMR system. So it's got the capability of giving me more transparency on how the building is using energy, but at the moment we don't use that. BIM is one way that we can start to, in my mind, in the future, it could be one way that we can start to join those gaps, really. Start to use the BIM model to understand where energy is used on the subsystems or different floors. And then when I get the actual sub-meter data, I can start to bridge those two gaps. I think that was kind of all I had on these slides, but there's other thoughts as well, but we can have that in the discussion, yeah?
Well, just you mentioned that those PVs, as you said, those were they were put in post-completion. They were put in last year, I think.
Yeah,
yes,
because we can see.
as you said, there were the fixings already there, but because of the maintenance and access, we have to add as well the roof restraint system.
Okay.
So that's something that maybe in the future we need to start thinking about. If we're retrofitting, can we think about that possibility? So yes, it's something that I just want to add to that.
Yeah,
And then
super.
I'm just going to start presenting. We did a small survey based on Fabi's running the soft landing project on our Ashton site. So we're giving some continuity to that process. We use the same questions to do a quick check of user feedback onto these. So you see here, we have started with question 2. On the whole, how would you rate the design of facilities, use of space, the image space presents to you with external visitors and guests, the contribution the facilities make to sense of community at work, how enjoyable the environment is to work. I have to mention that we got a very good rate of response. It was 1 week on air. We got 60 responses of 3 different groups. So we have feedback from students, staff that work within the building, and staff that works for facilities. I've also included at the end of this analysis, I also included comments that came from maintenance, all the people involved in maintenance for the building, and also comments from cleaning services. So we can start seeing a trend where most of the responses fall into the good and very good responses in the 3 groups. So I'm not going to go into each group, but generally the trend is that. Then in the student section, I added this more detailed graph about the different parts of the questions, and we can see as well trend into very good and extremely good. So on all the questions, you can see the same kind of trend. Then the following question was, the current facilities meet my needs. And apart from the facilities group, that is the one that is less habiting this building, so the people that only come occasionally to the building, the other 2 groups agree onto that the current facilities meet the needs. In the question about how would you rank your level of satisfaction with the following, most of the responses get us satisfied, with some other questions getting very satisfied and satisfied on the facilities and staff. You can see more dissatisfied on the staff group. But obviously the staff are not in the same situation as the students are going to be living here for a shorter period. The staff is usually contracted and using the building more often. How well do you think the facilities are performing in terms of energy efficiency? Generally, we get the response to be better than average. Only in the student group we can see the situation where I don't care, but we can expect that. So what we did is add into the survey a window for people to add in comments, and we try to do here a situation of love and hate. So in smaller text, you can see the kind of more negative comments. I didn't put everything. I just put like the kind of more significant ones. And in the larger text, you have the comments are more positive. So, for example, looks out of place when compared to the rest of the ad hoc campus is something that I think we all agree that obviously by having a new building, you can see more of the other portfolio that's not as new as that. There were comments as well on some issue that we have on the vents, that usually the students that live here, they stay all night working in their presentations. And at night time, the software is being programmed to change the air on the building, so just release the heat and intake new air. But sadly, that cannot be overridden, so the students complain about getting it too cold at night, especially on their feet. But then we're going to have that comment as well on the staff group and the facilities group. So yes, good comments. It's better than the rest of the campus. On the staff area, a lot of natural light is very positive. They feel that the natural light that comes into the building is very positive. The design of the building is good. The good cafe area and a mix of seating. And I have to say, when Andrew talked about the open access learning, that's something that we've been as well trying to convert some of the areas of the old stage into open access learning, because we see it's very popular that students have a kind of a different behavior when they are in open access learning. It makes them a bit more collaborative, talking to each other. It's very social learning that happens there. So we're replicating some of that in other spaces within the campus. In terms of the negatives as well, some of the issues with ventilation, there were some issues as well with lighting. So they're talking about lighting control, so having two controls, one next to the other, and probably not understanding what works what, and then taking a little bit of time to understand how it works. From facilities, we had same thing with ventilation, and also there's comments about how having exposed services and display will aid the education of students. Now, in terms of maintenance and operations, there's kind of, as well, some positive comments. I try to put that into highlighted tests, so people don't feel that it's any situation of blaming. It's just so we can maybe learn in the future how we're going to deal with this. So heating system works fine, ventilation system works fine, summertime temperatures is good. The building is cheap to maintain, and ground mass ventilation is good. There were some issues about the metering and BMS, and the same thing that Fabian mentioned, that you can see the records of, you can see the readings of the BMS, but you cannot access all the data that's been recorded by those BMS systems. So you cannot build on what's happened before, because the software is not being programmed to record past data. Again, the comment on software programming for control of ventilation needs the support of external consultation, so it becomes more an issue of then we need to expend some extra money to make this software reprogram for something that maybe we as a client needed to pick up earlier on. There was also some comments about noise from the ventilation system that has been reported, and because of the issue with ventilations, we found that users want to control the environment, and some of the caps on the heating system have been removed because people try to fix the situation by themselves. So we had to add extra collars to stop people taking the caps off. Then on cleaning services, we had some positive comments as well. There were a little bit of comments about not having a proper cleaner's room, and about the glass being difficult to clean from outside. So, but generally the comment was that they're happy to work here, and they like the natural light and the big open space. Now, what can we do to improve? And this is the objective of this opportunity to have all of you here. that for us, the objective of this would be getting the feedback about how we could make all this work. So, for example, we know that from the point of view of the client, we need to be more assertive, and we have to build within our standards how we want these things to be resolved. So, for example, I had comments from Nigel. I don't know where Nigel is. Sierra? So, yes, Nigel just was saying about probably we will need to have a little bit more input into how and how that defect period is important for us to know that the programming and the control system works. So we take more advantage of that defect period, so just to give us a reassurance that the building is going to perform.